Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Our guest today is widely regarded as Australia's leading life coach. He is the founder of the Insecurity Project and the voice behind the popular 1 Minute Coach radio segment, which influences more than 750,000 Australians every day. Today, he's going to show you how to stop fighting against yourself. Please put your hands together and help me welcome to the Mental Detox podcast, our good friend, Jamin Fraser.
Welcome, Jamin.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Always a pleasure to hear the voice, but to see the face, because you've got a face for radio and you've got a face for video. So you're one of the lucky ones.
Thank you. Nicest thing you've ever said to me. Thank you.
Now, we've been doing more stalking, and what we've realized is that you've done a lot of training for marathons.
I have.
And what we know about supreme business people is that they also have a very good physique, and they're physically strong as well as mentally strong and emotionally resilient. Now, in your time of training in marathons, what were some of those little demons that you had to deal with along the way?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing and so many metaphors from that. I reckon the first few marathons I did were out of determination and self-discipline and willpower. So as a young person, I think you've kind of got the ability to fight against yourself and get away with it. But then the last 4 marathons I did were a very, very different experience, because before each of them, I had to get permission from myself first before I could run them.
You wrote yourself a letter and said, "Dear Jamin, I give you permission to run this marathon."
It's a bit like that, because interestingly, on each of them, I had this idea in my mind. I'm like, I think I'm going to press go. I'm going to run another marathon this year. And then every one of them, the next thing that happened in my body was tension, injury, illness. So it was like this handbrake on, this sabotage. It's like my body saying, no, actually, you're not going to run a marathon. So what are you going to do about that? So this interesting discovery around the purpose of those internal resistance is to realize that it was always loving, that my unconscious is not a prick. It's not trying to ruin my life. There was just some really important conditions to satisfy before I got permission first. So for instance, the last marathon that I did, this might sound weird, but this is how my body communicates to me. I pulled the trigger. I'm going to do it. Next day, I had massive sciatic pain all down my left leg. So my piriformis muscle, which the sciatic nerve passes through, grabbed that nerve and held it on tight. And so I couldn't run. So initially, I'm like, oh, this is super frustrating. Now I can't run a marathon, but I want to run a marathon. And I stop and say, hang on a minute. What's the intention of this message to myself? It's that I don't have permission yet. Cool. So rather than, oh, that's terrible, then the question is, what would I need to do to get permission to run a marathon? And there were two things that I had to do. The first was that it had to be priority number 3, not priority number 1.
Okay.
So my tendency before running marathons was to make it number 1, just to lose myself in that process. But it's just a marathon, right? Like it isn't the main deal. So my family and my business had to come in front of the marathon. So if I could do that. So I'm like, yeah, I've got that. No worries. Went out training the next day, still so much pain. I'm like, I thought that was it. Clearly I missed something else. So there was one more condition I had to satisfy before I could have that pain removed. And it was that I had to take the podium off the agenda. So I'm a very ambitious character. I've run Townsville Marathon 8 times now, and always with the intention of winning that marathon or at least getting on the podium. And I've run it every second year, and the time that I've run would have won it the year that I didn't show up. So I just seemed to pick the wrong year. Anyway, so I've always been highly ambitious around that, and then always very disappointed. And so my own subconscious was saying, Jamin, you can't control who shows up on the day. So to get invested in an outcome you can't control is to set yourself up for a world of pain. So no, you cannot run another marathon while ever you need to be on the podium. So if you can be satisfied with running a PB or just giving it your best, if that's good enough for you, then yes, you have full permission. So I considered that, agreed to that. And then the very next day, no pain in my leg, no tension. And I went out and ran 30 Ks the next morning off very limited training before that and had total permission to engage in that marathon, and ran for the whole 16-week training period with no pain and no tension, and enjoyed that experience thoroughly.
Incredible. We've been looking at psychosomatic illnesses for the past decade. And some of the earliest work that I read on psychosomatic illness was from L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, the creator of Dianetics. And he was saying, in the 50s and 60s, that about 80% of illness that we have in our body is psychosomatic in nature. So it starts in the mind and then it shows up in the body. And we thought this is fascinating. And we started to dig deeper. And even some of the latest research that's coming out today by Dr. David Simonton shows that psychosomatic illness is equated to about 90% for all the reasons why people go to the doctor. Yep. And I love in flu season, like around Australia, all of a sudden it's a month out of from the flu season, and they start to advertise it. Get your Zyrtex, get your Kleenex tissues, and all of a sudden everybody's got the flu because they've been told what to do.
Absolutely,
so it's there.
Such a fascinating subject.
It is, and for you, you talk a lot about needing to stop fighting with ourselves, and this internal battle. How do people identify this? I believe the first step they've got to have is self-awareness. How do they identify the early stages of it?
I love weird symptoms. So I'm always fascinated by weird health stuff in myself and weird health stuff in other people. Like, it's possible that not everything's a signal. Like people do get sick, they do get injured, but where there's these patterns that keep showing up, or this weird stuff that's not, like when my piriformis grabs my sciatic nerve, I know I haven't injured myself. I know I haven't done my hamstring. I know I haven't hurt my back. There's no reason for it to be sore, yet there's massive tension there. So I'm like, this feels like my own body trying to get my attention. So that's where I think the self-awareness piece is, just to stop and ask, what for? Like, what is the intention of what's happening in my body? And to even just accept that all communication comes from a place of love. So there is a positive intention behind all communication. All resistance is from a form of protection. So it wasn't that my unconscious didn't want me to have fun and enjoy a marathon. It's my unconscious did not want me to get disappointed or distracted. So it's like, cool, I think you're going to get disappointed and distracted, so no, you can't run the marathon. If you can show me that you're not going to get either of those things, great, you can run the marathon. I was so grateful for that message when I finally understood it, because that was a loving message.
One of our clients, Craig Glacier, he's a personal trainer and in the UK, and he said that when your body hits about 40% of its capacity to run a marathon, to tire, he says you start to feel tired and the body wants to stop at 40%.
Right.
He says when you start to tire, you're only at 40%. You can go so much further. And he trains top athletes. And this is one of the things that he says. And, this tension that you're getting in your body, do you think people understand how to listen to their body? Do you think people can tune into their body? Or are they trying to look for a diagnosis?
No, I think typically people don't listen, and they don't want to listen because they imagine their body's going to tell them something hard or they can't do. So if my initial suspicion was right, oh man, this is frustrating. My body doesn't want me to run a marathon and I do want to run a marathon. Right. I'm just going to fight my way through. I'm just going to get it done anyway. I'm just going to force it. Like, that's all that is just evidence of not understanding the communication and not being willing to listen. So I think the fruit of being willing to listen, you understand that it's always positive, and then you go, oh, well, then I'll definitely listen next time because this has been a very kind message. Thank you, body. Keep talking to me. Keep sharing wisdom. Keep telling me where the life is.
I was talking to a family member, and I was looking at his face and at his head, and it was covered in psoriasis. Yeah. And he wanted to shake my hand. I'm like, oh, I won't shake his hand today because I could see him putting his hand through his hair. And I said to him, how are you doing? What's going on? And he started to talk about his brother and how his brother was getting under his skin and how his brother was causing him a problem. And then I thought about this psoriasis, metaphorically, having a look at how it was impacting his body. And every time he mentioned his brother's name, he started to scratch. And I said to him, does your brother get under your skin? And he's like, oh. And anyway, I talked to him a little bit about his brother. He talked about a conflict. And the moment that he got out of the conflict with his brother, the psoriasis disappeared.
Yeah, wow.
And I could hear it in his language, but
Yeah,
he
sure.
couldn't even connect it because he was so associated into the story.
Yeah, that's amazing.
On the body. What were you going to say, wife?
Just that when Jamie shared about his story, I just have an image pop back that when I was a crew, I always get sick before the long fly. Like I want to have a long fly. However, when I see the long fly on my roster, I just get sick. And
Wow.
the manager was sending to see the specialist. You remember, they put the thing on my heart and checking my problems.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And then I just, when you say that, you just have to listen to your body. That's something my body want to tell me. I kind of resistant. Like
Yeah, that's right.
I want to do it, but at the same time, I feel maybe my body telling me, oh, you probably, some part of me, I probably feel had a fear, like scare, doing the long fly. So it was very interesting that when you mentioned about that.
There's some great research in Christian Science, and they're talking about how powerful the mind is. And it's a great story. A lot of people have heard it before. A man is working on the railways, and on the railway, his job is to check that the refrigerated carts are operating. So to do that, he has to walk into the refrigerated cart, check the temperatures. So he walks in, and then the wind blows the door closed, and he's locked in a refrigerated train carriage. And this thing's at about minus 20 degrees. So you're not going to last very long in there. Now, he tried to get out, banging on the door. Nobody can hear him. He's hitting on the wall. Nobody can hear him. He starts to dial on his mobile phone, and there's no signal. And he knew that in minus 20, he was going to die. So the only thing he could do was to write his death story on the wall of the refrigerated cart. So he wrote this death story, and the story went for a few hours, and he was dead. The next morning, the next inspectors come through, opened up the door, found him laying dead in the refrigerated cart. And they read the story and they're like, how is it possible that this guy died? So they brought the forensics team in, and essentially what they discovered that the refrigerated cart was not turned on. There was 100% oxygen saturation in there, and it was impossible that he could have stopped breathing. And what they said was that the mind is so powerful, he's talked himself to death, and he wrote the whole story. And so this is the power of the mind. So with your technologies and what you're doing out there with your clients, what advice can you share with our friends and followers to immediately stop this fight?
Beautiful. Resistance is always from a place of love. So whenever you feel like you are getting in the way of your own goals, it's just because you don't have permission. And the reason you don't have permission is because your unconscious is trying to protect you from something. So if you were to stop judging, fighting, forcing, and start to listen and start a conversation with yourself and satisfy the conditions that are required before you have permission, you could work with yourself rather than against yourself. And if you can have permission to succeed, well, then nothing can get in your way.
100%.
Oh, I love that.
Now, for people who'd like to learn more about what you're doing and the good work you're doing, you're also going to be in America speaking. Where's the best place for our friends and followers to find you?
Yeah, JaminFraser.com. That's me, Jaemin, Fraser with a Z.com.
Excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we'll post the link below. Thank you so much again for being on here and sharing your thoughts and ideas. And we wish you a lot of success on the upcoming America trip.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks,
Thank
Jamin. Have a great day.
All right, bye now.